It's Lauryn Chun, founder of Mother-in-Law's Kimchi. Thank you so much for joining us for this premiere of our short film, Jang Mo Jip. It's a story that I was inspired to make about my mother, who was closing her restaurant, Jang Mo Jip, after 34 years. And it's really a story about love and resiliency, and a story about immigration, and just something that is really heartfelt, that really inspired me to start Mother-in-Law's Kimchi, and a family legacy I hope that you'll enjoy watching. And then be sure to stick around afterwards, where we'll be joined by our special guest, Matt Rodbard of Taste Podcast, as well as our film director, Edoardo Novello, who will share his own insights and his own immigration story as well, and really sharing this heartfelt piece about love and through food, and really building a community together. So I hope you'll enjoy this part of our kickoff celebration of Kimchi Month in November. 그래서 여기 얼마 동안 일하셨어요, 장목집에서?
아마 거의 10년 다 돼갈 거예요.
그리고 여기 그래서 이렇게 그 오너십 체인지하면서 뭐가 제일 아쉬운 것 같아요?
아쉬운 점이요?
네, 아쉬운
사장님과 함께 오랫동안 같이 일을 해왔는데, 사장님이 30년이 넘는 동안 우리 가정에서도 그렇잖아요. 어려운 일도 많고 좋은 일도 많지만 그 오랜 세월을 어떻게 잘 이끌어 오셨고, 그래, 그 점에 대해서 많이 존경스럽고, 사장님이 잘 이끌어 주셨던 것 같아요. 예.
내가 그 아빠 돌아가고 그 다음에 이거를 내가 직장 그때 그 미국 직장에 그 많이 받았어. 페이도 많이 받았는데 그것도 난 이나프. 그래서 뭔가는 해야 되겠다 하다가 생각한 게 설렁탕이었어. 난 하기 싫은데. 그래가지고 처음에 해서 오픈을 해서 이제 다 배워가지고 오픈을 해서 하다 보니까 국물이 없어. 그러니까 안 되겠다. 내가 국물을 만들어야 되겠다 싶어서 직장 갔다 와서 가게에서 잤어. 자면서 밤에 자면 또 만들어 놓고 그렇게 5일을 한 5일 3, 4, 5일쯤 했나 봐. 그러니까 내가 뻗어버렸어. 병 났어. 그러고 난 다음에 복회 절대 안 들어가잖아. 병 나고 난 다음에. 그래서 했어. 설렁탕이.
첫 번째 어렸을 때 설렁탕 먹은 거 그걸 좀
내가 그래 6.25 전의 일이야. 설렁탕 집이 그때 많지가 않았어. 여기저기에서 아마 특별한데 아마 몇 군데 있었는데 그건 기억이 없어. 그런데
서울이요?
서울에. 근데 우리가 이제 설렁탕을 사러 가면 쫓아가나 봐. 엄마를 쫓아가든지 뭐 누굴 쫓아가면은 양은 냄비, 커다란 거 노란 냄비에다가 이제 설렁탕을 담고 투고 박스가 없었어 그때는. 담고 그 다음에 이제 파는 꼭 먹어야 되니까 설렁탕에 파는 꼭 들어가야 되니까 파를 위에다 얹어준 거 기억이 있어. 근데 그거를 집에 가서 먹으면 너무 구수하고 너무 맛있었어. 그때 고기도 많이 못 먹을 때야. 그러니까는 그게 그렇게 맛있었지. 그때가 제일 처음에 먹은 기억이야, 내가.
그리고 여기가 제가 한 12년 동안 계속 머물러 있던 이유는 식구들도 너무 좋고, 같이 일하는 사람, 주방 언니들, 또 저희 사장님 비롯해서 너무 좋고요. 설렁탕에 대한 것도 그 이미지도 저는 너무 좋고요. 예, 또 설렁탕이라면은 한국에서도 제가 좀 많이 경험해 봤지만 한국 사람들의 설렁탕은 정말 오랜 역사를 가지고 있는 그런 설렁탕인 것 같아요.
근데 저기 메모리는 있어요? 어렸을 때?
설렁탕에 대한 거, 그렇죠. 저는 어렸을 때부터 집에서 엄마가 설렁탕이 곰탕이라고 옛날엔 그걸 곰탕이라고 했어요. 그 사고를 사고를 끓여가지고 그거를 옛날에는 하루 저녁 밤새 구워요. 기름을 계속 걸러내야 되고 이게 손이 굉장히 많이 가는 거예요. 그냥 뭐 딱 넣고서는 그냥 불이 알아서 해주는 게 아니라 사람 손이 가서 기름을 계속 걸러서 버려야 되고 이게 굉장히 손이 많이 가고 정말 귀한 음식이라고 생각해야 되죠.
She started the restaurant in 1989, I think after having had a full career kind of working in different jobs, you know, in the States and with the bigger companies. And so being an entrepreneur, being a business owner was newer, but it was also the second act of my mother's life. It was about the time that my father had passed away from cancer. Quite suddenly, and so she had a small savings from his life insurance that she wanted to invest or do something with, you know, and so like many immigrant families, it was either going to be a dry cleaner, which we thought maybe, but the restaurant business was not really something that was even thought of or really discussed. 그래서 미국에 와가지고서 무슨 꿈 하고 왔어?
미국에 가면은 이제 우리 우선 아이들의 장래를 보고 왔지. 우리도 그리고 또 한국에서보다는 여기가 더 살고 싶은 게 여기 와서 바다 먹고 바다 실컷 먹고 우유 실컷 먹고 오렌지 주스 실컷 먹고 그게 내가 꿈에 갖고 와. 거기 실컷 그런 거. 그랬더니 와서 조금 먹으니까 다 물려. 바나나도 실컷 먹고 바나나도 그때 너무 가난했잖아. 그때 그랬기 때문에 참 어려웠어 살기가. 한국이 잡들도 없고 그랬어. 그래가지고 미국에 막 와서 너희들 뭐 아무튼 내가 33년을 이렇게 편안하게 즐겁게 많이 퍼주고 사서 먹이고 이러고 살게 해주신 하나님 아버지께 감사합니다. 그러고 기도해. 지금도 하나님이 항상 함께 있기 때문에 하는 그런 마음을 가지고 살았으니까 그래서 맨날 기도가 요새는 하나님 아버지 처음부터 끝까지를 하나님이 다 책임지셔가지고 이렇게 내가 오늘에 이렇게까지 잘 살고 있었던 거 감사합니다. 그런 기도하잖아 지금 내가. 감사의 기도.
This part at the end is about her praying. Yeah, and thanks.
아니 왜 눈물이 나와?
Because you're praying.
종이 좀 갖다 줄래? This place, I never thinking about the big place. Before I have small place, and then I never thinking I'm gonna retire to that place. But
That's an interesting story.
yeah, the other story I have.
Yeah, because the restaurant was really small. 엄마가 이렇게 이 장모집 식당을 이렇게 34년 동안 이렇게 한 거는 그냥 보통 일이 아니에요. 이게 아주 제가 생각할 때는 이게 아주 몇 년 동안 식당 하는 것도 힘들지만 이렇게 오랫동안 그렇게 긴 길로 이렇게 한 게 아주 너무너무 감사하고 이 장모집 식당 때문에 우리가 이렇게 장모 김치도 이렇게 mother-in-law 김치도 이렇게 한 것도 다 너무너무 이렇게 하여튼 인생에 하여튼 아주 제일 큰 아주 제일 큰 선물인 것 같아요. 그래서 우리 엄마가 이렇게 지금 이 나이에 이렇게 리타이어하고 이 식당을 딴 사람한테 이렇게 팔 수 있고 하여튼 이렇게 그 장모집의 그 역사가 이렇게 컨티뉴하는 그런 게 아주 너무너무 자랑스럽고 우리 엄마 너무 사랑해요.
이거 소나무
I hope you really enjoyed the film. It's an honor to be here with Matt Rodbard. He's the host of Taste Podcast, for those of you who don't know. Wonderful podcast all about food and all the people that are behind the scenes and making it. And just an extraordinary storyteller, as well as a cookbook author of two very pivotal Korean cookbooks as well, one of which is about Koreatown and Korean cooking, and then your latest book, which is Korea World. And I'm Lauryn Chun, founder of Mother-in-Law. So the reason I ended up actually creating this film was that I had a great conversation with Matt. I reached out and I thought, well, should this be an article? You know, there's this really pivotal moment happening with the closing of my mother's 34-year-old restaurant, which was really the foundation and really the inspiration to launch Mother-in-Law's Kimchi. And so I really wanted to capture the storytelling. So I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for encouraging me to really kind of take this step forward and try and do something with this. So it didn't turn out to be a written form per se, but I had the privilege of creating this short film with a young film director, and I'd love to know what you think about it. I mean, just having seen it and kind of what
Yeah.
and
Well,
thoughts.
it's a real pleasure to speak with you. We've known each other since your cookbook, which was published before Koreatown, and really such an inspiration for many books to come in Korean cooking. And really, I was just it was an honor to see the film early, and really, Lauren, I have a lot of thoughts about it because, offering this glimpse into one of these types of restaurants that are kind of vanishing from the Koreatowns of America is really powerful. And of course, your family's story is great, but also as a just cultural document to see a South Bay restaurant 34 years running, and we'll get into a little bit of the story of your mother and why she opened it because I have some questions about that. But really, Torrance and Garden Grove and the South Bay is one of America's great Koreatowns, and many in LA know Olympic and Western and the bigger Koreatown, but the South Bay Koreatown to many is still very much the establishment, and that's a Koreatown that remains today as having a lot of single operators, lots of mom and pop shops, and it's very hopeful at the end that shows that the restaurant will continue in some form, and really to see Solantang presented in such a cool way and in such a unique way, being done in a very traditional method that you'd find in Korea, and not using, any skipping any steps in this very painstaking dish is a rarity. And so I'm so happy that you were able to document it. But first, how's your mom doing now that she's retired?
Oh, so I was so worried that she was just, going to be really bored and whatnot. And I mean, I think there's probably a little bit of that, but I think after 34 years, I mean, how difficult it is to just keep a restaurant going. And after 30 plus years, I think she was kind of relieved and just in a sense, and just to have a peace of mind, if you will, just I think as a small business owner and as a restaurant owner, it was a lot, and I think she realizes how much strain or stress that she was really under to make sure that things were kind of, working. And so I think she is really enjoying her retirement. So
Oh,
I
that's
think
great. I mean,
that,
she's such a character, even though she speaks only in Korean, you can
Mhm.
just tell from the film how deeply personal this restaurant is. And the story of it, I'd love to hear more about 34 years ago, your father suddenly passes away, and she had relatively limited options to make a living, and she decides to open a restaurant. Lauren, what's that like in your family?
I mean, to me, it's still, I mean, yeah, because so many Korean families, the focus is around food, and especially I think as an immigrant, and I mean, food was important in Korea, but even being in the States, so I never really thought of it as something like, oh, yeah, of course, your grandmother's cooking is far better than anyone's, and the nucleus of the family and the food that connects Korean families is just incredible. But it's, also, I think, the heart of many traditions, many traditional cultures that have food as the center. But I really, really, when I say that the last thing that we thought she would do was a restaurant, that was not really in the picture. But I think, in a sense, I think with being an immigrant, really meaning that, you really are resourceful as to how you make ends meet, and how you really kind of survive or find work, or um, and do those sort of things. The idea of the Songtang kind of came about because one of our aunts was working at a Songtang restaurant, and we thought, oh, and it was very on trend at the time. But I think it also has a very deeper connection to this generation, like you said, about the restaurant owners, and she's, my mom lived through, she was, a young child when the Korean War broke out. So it's like this memory of this bountiful, and soup really being at the heart of what Korean cuisine is, because I mean, I've read that there's more Korean soup recipes than there's anywhere else in the world. I mean, it's at the heart of Korean cooking. I mean, that people are really not aware of is the soup cook, and it's like, and it's a very time-honored process because it just takes so long to get that, extracted flavor of the bone, and slow cooking, and just, that deep flavor that can only come with time and care. So the idea, I think, of the Tang is really about like almost a generational thing. But it's also, to me, it always, I mean, there's probably more, and I don't know if you have more history to share about what you know about Songtang. I'd love to know that. But it does seem to be the one that kind of stands out as its own, on its own, really. The Songtang soup
Yeah.
restaurant, right?
Yeah, Solentang and Gamtang are certainly, iconic
Yeah,
tongs,
yeah,
and I agree with you fully. Like, tang jjigae, guk is like very much the root of Korean cooking, and in America, we sometimes forget that with so much modern Korean being out there, and
yeah.
barbecue, of course. But I think, Solentang as a dish is it's so interesting that it's this ancient dish, or not ancient, but it's a traditional dish that for years was certainly an event, in New York, where I live. There's restaurants, on 32nd Street back in the early 2000s when I started writing about Korean food that were like, iconic for their, for this one dish, solentang. Fortunately, a lot of them have moved out because of real estate situations. So in LA, you're going to find more Solentang restaurants. But it's funny how Solentang is bone broth, and we've experienced such a boom in this interest in bone broth,
Hmm.
from like Western media, fetishizing bone broth as this fortifying, nutritious dish, which it certainly is. So much collagen, and a great Solentang is slowly cooked, and in the film you see the great pains of the straining and the multiple broths, the multiple cauldrons, and like that view is what you would see in Korea. That's like such a traditional way, and it's painstaking. And when it arrives, it has so many noodles, and you put a little bit of, scallions, of course, on top of it, and then you can have wonderful kimchi with it, mu kimchi, or any variety. It's such a great combination. But I think it's one of these dishes that is unfortunately, leaving American Koreatowns, and I think they're so specialized. And is the next restaurant that is taking over, are they taking over as a Solentang restaurant?
Yeah, I mean, everything as is, and
That's great.
a cool folklore like that I learned about Songtang is that in the old days, so Joseon Dynasty, where you had the royal, the wealthy, they would have, because the cows were so few and far between.
Yeah.
And so landowners or the royals would have, if they killed a cow, then they had all the good pieces of meat and whatnot, and they did a bunch of things to it. And so the idea of the songtong really kind of came, as I understood, is that they took then the bones and the leftovers and made
Mhm.
tong soup out of it, which I thought
Yeah.
was a very communal food, and also just like the celebration of the special act of
Yeah.
a cow. So I thought that was really neat. The idea of the kimchi then really becomes such a focal point for Seolleongtang, because it is one of the very few dishes, and particularly soups, that are just it's a pure sort of contrast, like a canvas for kimchi. The kimchi has to taste good, you
Yeah.
know? And so that was one of my kind of innate sort of learnings that I had, all the times that my mom had the restaurant, that I thought, well, the kimchi has to be good, and usually it's like the gakdugi and the
Yeah.
kimchi, and then that kimchi that is served, at Jang Mo Jip is the gakduri kimchi, which
Hmm.
then kind of makes sense, because it's like the long strips. The gakduri is usually what the first version of kimchi that you make during
Hmm.
kimjang, to just sort of, that's unfermented, and that's you're supposed to eat right away before you ferment all the other stuff and put it away for the winter.
Right.
Also this kind of festive celebration, which I thought was really interesting. But
Yeah.
anyways, it really became this kind of canvas that the kimchi has to be good at the Songtang restaurant, because it's the only
Yeah.
judging it, but it's this only side dish that goes with it.
Yeah, and Solentang is bland. I mean, if you don't do anything, it's a very minimal dish. So you gotta have either salt or scallions, and then of course you have this important panchan next to it.
Right.
And like in Seoul, like the big Solentang restaurants will have hundreds of people dining at the same time, and then they'll have big cauldrons of dakgogi on the table with scissors at the
Yeah.
ready.
Yeah.
Which is so, I mean, if you go to any Solentang restaurant, you have that experience where you get to scissor off your own kimchi. And then, in Seoul, it's like, it's all communal, it's not, you don't have to throw anything away. It's just like, take as much as you want.
Yeah.
It's such a special dish.
Yeah. Did you feel like there's like just a kind of a common theme or thread amongst the different kind of Korean restaurants that you've met and interviewed the owners and whatnot?
Yeah, in our latest book, Korea World, we really placed a focus on modern Korean cooking. Our first
Mhm.
book was looking back into the traditions of Korea. So our latest book, we spent a lot of time in Korea, going to restaurants and seeing what was happening in modern spaces. And it's remarkable how Korea has evolved. I started going to Korea in the early 2010s, and over this time, it's really taken a lot from the West, and I couldn't say this is either a good thing or a bad thing. I know both sides of the coin will weigh in, but seeing modern Korean cooking being done in like a wine bar format in Korea is quite popular, and that was a theme we saw often, is Korean food is not about these old school cauldrons like your mom's restaurant, but more Western style with extensive wine lists, and style of service that you'd say maybe looks more like London or New York. Also, we saw a lot of Sichuan flavors entering Korea, which is interesting. You see it in LA as well, and not much in New York yet, but I think it's on the horizon. But this kind of interest in, Szechuan peppercorns and Szechuan chicken, you see it at a lot of restaurants. So that was an interesting little theme. And then the last one, which we write about in the book, is coffee in Korea is something that really is in some of the world's best. And the cafes that I've been able to go to, you could see them in any city in America, any major city, and they would be like the best coffee shop. And I loved that about Korean culture, how adaptive and entrepreneurial the culture is. And you're seeing individual cafes roasting their own coffee and doing a service style that extremely cool, like with pour overs and using like very precise techniques in roasting. And like when I went to Korea for the first time, coffee was basically push button machines and, Americanos. There wasn't really a roasting culture. So it's the kind of country that and the culture that really adapts rapidly. And so our book really explores many of this modern Korean cuisine that is really starting to make its own, name in the world.
Yeah. Which also I find I love that you kind of brought up the coffee culture, but at the same time they drink more instant coffee than anybody else
Yeah,
I've seen either too.
definitely. I mean, there's of course for sure there's still like a lot of instant coffee used and really it depends on where you're going. You can go to certain neighborhoods in Seoul and have like just real mom and pop spots. It's a massive city, but you see this trend kind of rising. What are you seeing yourself? I'm wondering from the retail side, I'm selling kimchi in, grocery and really going to a lot of restaurants. What are you seeing?
I think it's really exciting having launched Mother-in-Law's Kimchi 15 years ago, where there was very nascent, if I could even say that, knowledge about what kimchi is and how to eat it and what do you eat it with, and do I need a bowl of rice, and all of these questions that used to come
Hmm.
up. Now there's a lot less, of it because kind of kimchi goes with everything. But I do think that it's exciting to see. I think people's preference for because I think with kimchi it's like anything that you get to kind of know, you start to understand the fermentation levels, and that's the part that really makes kimchi taste different at every stage. And so I know with our like reserve kimchi that we have at Whole Foods, that's going to be much more pungent and much more kind of a aged kimchi as opposed to something that's fresher or lighter. But I think it's exciting to see the breadth and scope and different kinds of types of styles of kimchi, if you will. That's,
Yeah.
even a whole set of, shelves at Whole Foods or whatnot, that it's just popping up in so many just grocery stores everywhere. So that's really exciting. In terms of just the other, I'd say other Korean American restaurants, I mean, do you get the sense? I mean, my feeling is that whether it was my mother kind of, talking about her nostalgia for Tong, or even I think her staff and really talking about their nostalgia. It's like that that kind of voice of just having nostalgia for the homeland. It's expressed in the restaurant, and like you said, it's this last sort of generation that it won't come back. The next version will be, somewhat different. And as like anything and everything in life is, it continues to evolve and change like the
Yeah.
language.
Yeah, and I think real estate has a lot to do with that. When you have these restaurants that are part of neighborhoods that are quickly gentrifying, you
Mhm.
see the old restaurants have to close. So it's great that in Garden Grove the rents are not pushing people out. I see there's a restaurant in LA called Soban. I don't know if
Mhm.
you've ever been on Olympic, and they're known for their ganjang which is a marinated crab. And that's a cool story in that the young daughter has taken it over and is now running it, and really it's become like an Eater top 38, and LA Times writes about it, rightly so. It's a great place. And so like seeing the tradition passed on is really cool that happens, and it's less and less, but there are cases where these older established restaurants are keeping their traditions alive. And also in our research and reporting on the book, like we went to a city like Portland, Oregon, which has like 8% Asian American population. It's a very white city. And even with that, there's a really tremendous Korean scene there. It's not large in size, but large in volume. And Chef Peter Cho is doing incredible work at Hanok and Jeju, and there's a restaurant called Du's that does a Korean style teriyaki, and that's any Portlanders know this is like the best teriyaki, and it's owned by a Korean family. Teriyaki, of course, is a Japanese preparation, but the way that it's presented has hints of Korean culture in it. And like I see this as kind of a symbol for how America is becoming more interested in Korean food, and cities that aren't the main Korean cities are now having Korean restaurants that are part of the culture. One last example, in Austin, Texas, there's a restaurant called Underdog. It's run by a Momofuku alum, and it's amazing how they're doing their style of Korean cooking in a very modern, new construction building. They're doing this incredible wine service, and they're doing, dishes like grilled oysters with chicharron and a kimchi butter, which is like very modern and maybe not what you would see in a traditional Korean restaurant, but man, you would of course see that in Korea. Go to great restaurants, you're gonna see grilled oysters, you're gonna see, and like that's such a flavor profile. That's like this great combination of flavors that you'd find in like a bossam, like an oyster, a chicharron, and kimchi butter is like pretty much the flavors of bossam that you would
Right.
have in a traditional bossam. So I think of that example as like where Korean food is going in America, and it's exciting to see it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about as you're talking about this, I'm like, wouldn't it be cool to have, maybe, and some restaurants already do this, but to have like if you have like equivalent to something like a wine flight, you could have a kimchi flight and have
Yeah.
like kimchi fermentation levels and types to get people to understand and and,
Oh.
and taste, kimchi, more kimchi.
Yeah,
Um,
you bring out the old stuff. I think you could really explain why a 3-year aged kimchi is so prized in Korea.
yeah.
That'd be fun. Would you ever open a restaurant?
No, that's why when you were saying about talking about Soban, I was like, this was my answer to not having to really take the reins of my mom's restaurant and take that torch, because I was like, okay, don't want to run a restaurant, but
Yeah.
what else could I do? And somehow the small idea of selling what I thought was the best tasting kimchi really took off. And as we're talking about kimchi in November for Kim Jong Month, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about the first time that I was trying to get into Brooklyn Flea with the kimchi and being told that the kimchi was too intense,
Yeah.
And this is 2009, so this is we've come a long way. But
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. Your trajectory and your brand has been 15 years is amazing. I mean, it really predates most of the energy around Korean food in America and like the media too. Your cookbook too. Tell me about it. Like it was still, I mean, still is today one of the go-to resources for people. And do you still look back at it? How do you feel about it? And if now, what is it like over probably 13 years old?
exactly. I think it was just the first few years of kind of launching, mother-in-law's kimchi, and I thought, I need to explain to people what kimchi is. They keep thinking it's this one thing and it's chili laden, Napa cabbage is
Yeah,
kimchi. It's not though. You can make kimchi out of anything, and it's a seasonal type of, like it's a verb, it's like you
yeah,
can just about anything. So I really wanted to um tell that story. And I remember my editor at the time was like, because there was just a little sriracha book that came out, and she wanted to do a little like 4x4, like little coffee table book. And I was like, no, I can't
yeah,
do that. So it got bigger, but
yeah.
I look back and I'm just really proud. I'm just really, I don't know how I could do it now, but I think at the time when I had this idea, and then I had, Olga who helped me write a lot of the, recipes together, but go through the whole thing. And I just think, how did I do that? I scratch my head because I don't like, because what it's like to put together a cookbook. And I think as
Yeah,
time and doing 60 recipes, but I do believe that when you have a purpose and you have a passion towards something, it's like it all comes together,
yeah,
and so yeah, no, I'm really, really thank you for just yeah, asking and just
yeah.
It's really, yeah, it's really one of the probably achievements that I will always, think about as just the journey of building, mother-in-laws or really sharing kimchi with the world. I mean, it really feels like I still am one jar at a time, or with gochujang even, but it's really great to be able to be at the forefront and really be able to do it in a way that is really authentic to me, and
Yeah,
do it that way. So
very cool. Yeah.
um are there some other kind of takeaways that you had from the clip, or that we should
Over in
really?
the film?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the worker that's profiled, is she still working at the restaurant?
Yes.
That's great. That I was like, I hope that's the story, because that's like, that's one of the big takeaways is the loyalty and having staff that stick around. And I think the person had worked there for over 10 years. And yeah, I mean, it's remarkable that your mom ran this restaurant for so long, because it's not easy. And being especially when she was a single mom opening it in 89, that's a lot. Did you see her at all when you were growing up, or was she always at the restaurant?
I mean, she was very much into the restaurant, but I was, fairly kind of, I think in college by then or something. So it was not really in my sort of earliest kind of memories of, as a child kind of growing up in a restaurant environment, but something that definitely probably had an influence on me, because after college, then I went and worked at a French restaurant, and, went to Europe and fell in love with the food and all of those things. So it, in a way, I think probably you probably know from many of my peers or chefs, or, that have all kind of gone through this, went and worked at a Michelin restaurant, whatever, this Western influence, and then you find your way back home in a way that's your own. And everyone kind of has their own version of how they find their own voice back home. But that's what it was like for me to really to launch Mother-in-law's Kimchi, but really through the lens of the experience that I had, which was falling in love with wine and cheese and Western food and fermented foods. And I thought, well, this is just like kimchi is just like that. It's just it happens to be Korean and has a whole history about it.
Hmm. What
So
do you think about this big shift in New York over the past couple of years of, these fine dining restaurants? Um, some of the city's best are Korean. We've got Auto Mix, we've got Ojimi, and many more that have become the most, I would say, critical and buzzed about restaurants in the city. And there's many opening on the horizon too. I mean, you must be thrilled. I mean, it must be kind of surprising. I mean, if you look back at 15 years ago, it certainly wasn't the case.
yeah, it was all French. Um, and yet, I think I think it's just not about just Korean food, but I think as it's sort of maybe the backbone of it, I kind of see maybe the common theme as being something about fermentation and fermented flavors that come through that really amplify, I think, our taste buds, really in a way. I think about like restaurant Noma and what he's been doing, and I think it kind of all makes sense in this kind of realm of natural cooking, and I mean of finding these flavors that are really in nature.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Yeah, it's a good point. I think you're right. Like, there's definitely like a link between some of the modern restaurants that, that Scandinavian movement, of course. In France, there's been a lot of restaurants that prize foraging and gardening. And now with like the Auto Mix team, JP and Elia, what they've done with just like marketing. It's like branding your restaurant, being smart about how you present it. You're not trying to do the French version of Korean food. You're doing modern Korean fine dining, and they've created a vocabulary with auto mix that is just like just original, fully formed. And, you know, they opened in 2018 and their careers have really gone off. But then you also look at like Simon Kim and what he's been doing with Coat and Kokodak, and just in a different lane, doing like buzzy, slightly clubby steakhouse and fine wine service with Coat. And so it's like taking some ideas from established places, but then making it feel very Korean.
Yeah.
You walk into Kokoduk and you're like washing your hands in this amazing sink, and it feels like it could be Seoul. It has a real unique style to it. And I think that that's why these restaurants have succeeded so much,
Yeah.
in capturing these New Yorkers who are pretty cynical about restaurants. You see restaurants close all the time. It's just amazing to see these modern Korean restaurants become the best in the city.
Yeah. Um, it's so sad though. I think after I ate at Automex or some of these modern Korean restaurants, I'm always like, my mom would never go for this kind of
No.
food, you know? It's
Yeah, fine dining is definitely for a particular diner. It's not for everyone for sure. And the price point can be challenging, and also just the style of service can be challenging too. But in New York, at least, and in LA at Baru, and other places, I think about Yangban as two examples in LA. The way that they're doing service, it's really like just this. These are the biggest, buzziest restaurants in these cities, which is so cool.
do you think there is a difference between this LA style of the fine dining versus New York, or is it just,
I mean, being honest, I think it all started in New York. It's New York is the dominant city.
yeah,
Uh, Muna is another example, which isn't fine dining, but it's definitely up there in terms of the style of service. And you've got Meju in Long Island City, Hooni Kim's new tasting counter, which is I haven't made it there, but by all accounts, it's exquisite the way he's using fermentation and the style of service. LA is always going to be the beating heart of Korean food in America, but and Your Mom's Restaurant is part of that legacy. It's really where the highest concentration of Koreans live in America, and it's really the place you're going to find all Korean food. But with fine dining, I think it's all about New York.
yeah. Yeah, what I find really fascinating is that nostalgia in the food that really doesn't change, and then you have this whole brand new, language of the modern Korean cooking, and it's like this huge contrast between like instant coffee drinking or like,
Yeah,
something
third wave.
in your own coffee type of thing. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, no matter what style of dining you like, is it fast casual? I know Ji Kim in Ann Arbor, amazing chef who runs a great restaurant called Miss Kim, is working on a fast casual idea, which is going to be plant-based and have some inspiration from the Buddhist temple cuisine movement, but also be on a college campus and be very accessible to all diners, and using farms in Michigan. And there's just a lot of progressive ideas around Korean food in America. It's like this next decade, I mean, it's going to be amazing to see how much energy is put into Korean food, because it's really going to happen. It's clear. And for a country, just to remind everyone, we're a country the size of Indiana, population of 60 million.
right.
The way that this culture has been, processed and adored, and the reach of it in the world is an extraordinary accomplishment for the Korean culture. Just to have China looking at K-pop as the top music, and looking at the film and TV industry in America, how some of our top shows in America are Korean, either competition or dramas. And that's incredible. I mean, it's not a big country, and it's I say that a lot, and it's the truth.
Yeah, I think I've been I started rereading or trying to finish the Pachenko, and then
Yeah,
through it, it's so vivid
yeah,
how growing up with these stories of yes, Korea was a colony of Japan, and yes, we went through a Korean War, and so all of that kind of has made the people very, very resilient, if you will, you know.
amazing, amazing culture. And I don't think many Americans realize that colonial period, and how that really ground the progress in the country to a halt and is a really painful history. And it's remarkable coming out of that, and then World War II and the Korean War. And then we're not even a generation later, and your mother's story is, moved during the war. I mean, look at where Korea is right now compared to then. I mean, I'd love to ask your mom, like, what does she think about these shows and the music being such a part of American culture? There's no way you could have thought that in 1989 when you're running a restaurant, when you're opening it. It's remarkable.
I mean, I was in shock. I mean, I don't go back to Seoul enough. I really want to, but the last time I was there in 2016 or something, and I walked into a tiny little restaurant with a guy who was had just like bar service, but was making the perfect poached egg with like over rice, and it was like a whole poached egg kind of trend that was happening. And but it was felt so Japanese, and his intention and his focus. I felt like, is he Japanese? Like, what is going on here? And I thought how odd that it was because, I mean, even when I was young in Korea, I mean, I we immigrated when I was about 7 years old, but there was eradication of anything that was Japanese. You didn't even know it
Yeah,
existed, and
yeah,
rightfully so because of what they went through as history. But
yeah.
it's just really interesting how these things
Hmm.
change over time. That yeah.
Yeah.
As we talk about Kimchi Month, I mean, from your observation of meeting so many Korean American restaurant owners, like how much of an importance is the kimchi recipe in these restaurants and
Mm.
presented?
I mean, Lauren, you have to have your point of view on kimchi if you're going to call yourself even a Korean American restaurant or a Korean inspired restaurant. I think, be it making your own during Kimjon, is it a process that you articulate to your diner, or is it taking kimchi from a source? Is it from a market that's local? Maybe it's mother-in-law. Having a narrative around your own kimchi is like a French restaurant having a narrative around their cheese cart, looking at the old school reference, but or of course a wine bar having a narrative around their wine list. It's like you can't ignore this product, this food that is so foundational in Korean cooking. And I think a lot of chefs are, like you said, it is a verb, and are using kimchi all over the place. In like Yangban, I had this incredible pear and avocado kimchi that I just loved from them a year ago, and really seeing kimchi being used loosely and fluidly is what the modern chef has to do, and does. And yeah, you gotta have some game. You gotta have some A game if you're gonna be a Korean restaurant. You gotta have great kimchi, and really know how to kind of articulate it to the diner.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know it's been my experience for a lot of the kimchis though that come out and any walk into any Korean restaurant and it's too fresh. It's super fresh because there's
Yep.
no time to ferment it, and it's just kind of
Yeah.
it's quickly made and it's although many Koreans do prefer fresh kimchi that to me tastes like a salad. I'm like, it hasn't even had chance to
Yeah.
that. So
It is a salad. I mean, that's what I would say. The earliest kimchis are salads, and some people like that. As you
yeah,
said, it's like very desirable to have a fresher taste. You can taste the pear in there. You can taste, the quality of the ingredients, the shrimp paste, depending on what type of kimchi you're doing. And then with fermentation, it kind of morphs into something completely different that, is great with other foods like, barbecue. You want like samgyeopsal. you want like a really great kimchi, like beju, dekugi, it doesn't matter. You just want to have it to complement pork. You know, it's really nice to have a fermented taste.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you. Now I really want to have some kimchi and pork. Right now,
Me
so
too. I know it's like, you know, in the afternoon and I'm thinking I need to drive to my nearest Korean restaurant, find some samgyeopsal, maybe add some sesame oil to it,
are
wrap
you
some.
making some serious Korean food though at home too? Every once in a
I
while?
do when we were developing the recipes, I made them
Yeah.
all and I really I dive in.
Yeah.
Um, I don't make as much now as I did when I was working on the book,
Yeah.
but I would love to make some with you someday. That'd be fun.
That'd be wonderful. On that note, thank you again so much for joining us, Matt. Really, really appreciate it. And it's so much fun kind of talking about the film and just, your expert knowledge and all the Korean restaurants and food. Really, really
Well,
appreciate
congrats on the launch of the film. It's very, very important that folks check it out and just see the history of a restaurant at Los Angeles that, you know, is a just a classic Korean American story. So.
And for Kimchi Month today, we are joined by our short film director for our film, Edoardo Novello. And it's just an honor and pleasure to have you with us to talk more about the filmmaking process and what we filmed together. It was actually about this time last year, which is an
It
incredible
was, yeah.
thing to do. And if we look back, because it was right around that, I think that Thanksgiving weekend. So, um,
It was, yes.
yeah, how did that year fly by so fast? But anyways, um, it would be great to have a little bit more of your background and how you personally found your way to film and what this project sort of meant to you, because I know that we were introduced or got together because you had graduated from the films program here at Chapman University, which is very prestigious. And I know that your background and your interest and passion in film really has been something that has really been helped fuel the project as well. So I'll just kind of let you talk a little bit about your background and what this project meant to you.
Of course. So, thank you so much, Lauren, for the introduction and, for giving me time to speak about this film that we did together. I feel like for me, this movie kind of represents a certain way a path I tried to start several years ago when I was in Italy. I'm originally from Italy, from Venice. I pursued at the beginning a Bachelor in Film Studies before coming here to America. And this American journey was kind of the ending target of a longer one that I started back in like 2015 at the time. So it's been several years, and over all these years, I always try to focus on stories that could, in a certain way, express something about the communities we live in, and just even about the relationships where we share with each other. For me, what really mattered the most, since the beginning, was just to find the sort of like thread that connects each other, to find that element that makes us who we are. Starting back in Italy, when I was there, I did a couple of documentaries with some medical institutions where I work with some of the patients of institutions. And I won a scholarship back then that helped me to finalize my last bachelor years. And then after that, I came here to America, and that's where we met when I was at the Chapman University pursuing my MFA in film directing. We worked together. I think in our first video was maybe about a year, more than a year ago, when we did our TikTok. It was the TikTok advertisements for your recipes. And I remember finding that in a website of a school at the time. And then just keep working together. Exactly now, I think it's taking about 1 year ago during Thanksgiving time when we did our documentary.
Yeah.
I feel like this process was in a certain way kind of representing what, as I said, what kind of pushed me since the beginning. The idea that when you contacted me and you asked me about doing this project, for me it just was about doing pursuing a film that could, in a certain way, say something about yourself. I know at the
Mm.
time we talked a lot about how present you should be or you shouldn't be in this picture. We talked a lot about, oh, this shouldn't be just mother-in-laws, this should be also a Jang Mo Jip. But
Mhm.
eventually, I feel like as we're talking together, with the school was like, as we knew, a very deep connection between the two. Coming from inspiration, coming from just growing up in the same environment, one can't exist without the other. So doing this project was, in a certain way, a, a beautiful experiment to put together two realities and to find a thread between them, I think.
Yeah. Were you kind of surprised? Were there moments where you were kind of surprised along the way that you just kind of was unexpected and pleasantly surprised or
I think for me it was when I was talking to your mother, especially when I was talking to her. What was surprising to me, I think it definitely what just surprised me was the relationship between you and your mom. Starting with your mother, I guess it was for me to see how much she cared about her restaurant. It seems something normal to say. You're a business owner, you care about your activity, but it's not something that always becomes so attached to your heart as it is for some people. And I feel like your mother put really her heart into this. She really believes into this business. And for her, it's not just a business. For her, as she says some point in our documentary, for her, it's about providing good food to the people, to make them happy. Is to do, she sees that, I feel like, in a certain way, like a service. Your mom is very religious. I feel like she sees it as a service to the community, which I think is beautiful. And it was surprising because I I found myself very connected to this person, even if we come from different realities, different backgrounds, different ages. But it was for me, when she was talking, I was thinking, wow, this is just beautiful. And
yeah.
seeing the connection, between what she does and what you also say, because you saw at the beginning, I feel you saw your activity in a different way, but as you go deeper, I feel like your activity, Marian loves kimchi, is a sort of like prosecution what your mom wants to do in a restaurant. If your mom wanted to bring recipes and to make people happy for her food, you wanted to get from this happiness, to grab from it, and to put it into something broader to make what your mother wanted renowned in a certain way nationwide, which I think is beautiful. That's what surprised me the most.
Oh, thank you. That was just so beautifully said. And I think it really did transcend, that message, throughout the film. And what I thought was really interesting was just this idea of family and the nucleus and the restaurant that and then even the head chef lady, and her other employee that was the server, like everybody's talking about this idea of family, and it's like the
Hmm.
heart, and the food and the center, and like you said, like the service and the act of love that is,
Yeah.
that is really the core of our human exchange, really, that I really felt like that was a common theme about, family and about hardship and good times, but it's just kind of the the scale of what it takes to, run a restaurant year over year, but 30 plus years. And it's just that was a really nice theme to really see. So thank you for capturing that in this way. I really was impressed how much sort of dedication that you had to the film, and geez, all those early morning shots that you you took. What was it like for you to be at the restaurant and filming those scenes, especially before the restaurant opened, and really these kind of, at 5, 6 a.m., 5 a.m. in the morning, I think you were there.
It
Um,
was, yes.
and what that was like for you.
I it's funny because I actually it's funny because I drove by a restaurant by a Jang Mo Jip's restaurant about 2 days ago. I was just in the area and I was like passing by and I decided to stop from it. And I remember over the road at the time when at the time, as of now, I'm living in North Hollywood. So going there at 5 a.m. was an interesting journey. You see like all the differences are coming from Los Angeles, going down to Garden Grove, which is just beautiful and very greeny. And I feel like for me, I remember, because we wanted to capture the sort of like daily cycle of a restaurant. We wanted to find the true identity embodied from the morning start to the ending of the nighttime of the restaurant. And I remember that when I came here at the time at 5 a.m., I was in contact with one of the employees of the restaurants, and we're like messaging saying, "Hey, I'm coming. Wait for me. Wait for me." And I remember at the time I arrived there at 5 a.m., but one of the people working in the restaurant was about to open the restaurant already. So I remember that parked in front of the restaurant on the other side of the street, and I rushed inside with my camera, being like, "Okay, wait a second. I'm ready. I'm ready to film. Don't start without me. Give me 1 second." And I pull up the lenses very quickly, and we went inside, and it was a certain way surprising to see how this how a restaurant opens in the morning, as simple as it is, about starting the fire, taking out the ingredients, start cutting things, cleaning around. But in itself, it was surprising to me because it was just following these very few people in the morning, turning on the machinery, and you see all these lights reflecting on the different walls. It's in a certain way, it's very artistic in itself. It has a very peculiar aesthetic. And then going to the kitchen and see, taking out everything from the frozen items or the fresh items, and combining together, cutting them together. It was just something unique to do it in the morning. And on the day, I remember that I was following, because I was trying to capture the oxbone soup at the time. And as we see in the documentary, the oxbone takes every certain time, every few hours, we need to mix it and to add and to take out and to clean and wash and put inside again. So it's a long process. And I remember that I was in one of the rooms of a restaurant, my computer working, and every now and then I had one of the chefs coming to me and say, "Hey, we're ready to do the new mix." I was coming out, take the recording, stay there a few minutes, then going back inside again in my room and edit it or just play it together and see how it was. Until the night, when at the night it was getting very cold and we were closing restaurants, and it was very, in a certain way, it was very just magical to see, everything getting close for the day and getting ready for the day after. As I said, what your mom created, I feel like it is a very personal perspective. It's not just a business for her. And I feel like also her employees really embody this aspect. For them, it's about taking care of a living being, which is a restaurant. It's not just, throwing things around, putting things in the dishwasher, run out.
Right.
And it was just beautiful to see also the restaurant together, last moments of the same woman that opened it in the morning to closing at night with the keys, and me on the other side and just recording, the signs of the restaurant, lighting in the darkness with everything else around just being plain dark because it was night. It was just beautiful, I feel like. It was
Yeah,
it was beautiful.
absolutely. Yeah, because I think so many times it's really easy to forget when you're at a restaurant or that you're there and you taste the food, you eat it, and then you leave. It can be a very transactional experience, but
Yeah.
to really kind of capture it from morning to night, the entire cycle of it. And I think that and also the beauty about this process of slow food and this making of this soup, is really 24 hours. It's continuous. It's like blood flowing through your veins. It's a continuous process, and then the care that it takes, that you think it's just boiling, but it's not. It's the constant ladling, it's the taking out, it's the rinsing, it's the putting back in. And so all the care that happens for what seems like a very simple food, but to get really behind the scenes, and you really feel that cycle, that continuity, and that the light and the dark and dawn and dusk and just all of it. So I want to thank you for really capturing it so well. What do you think that the struggles of immigration, or kind of that story in the film, the mother-daughter kind of relationship, is there anything there that you was really meaningful for you to kind of really talk about in the really convey in the film?
I mean, for me, it was I always feel like the stories of people that immigrate to another country are unique, each of them has their own meaning. And I feel like your story, your mother's story, was in itself unique as well. When I was talking to your mother and she was telling me about the struggles that she had back in the country, the struggle in finding food sometimes, the struggle in always having the same items because, at the time they were the cheapest ones. So you had to recook the same things, find new ways to make one ingredient in a certain way different from what you had at lunch, from what you had the dinner the night before.
Yeah.
And when she was telling us about when she came here, I really saw the need for another reality, a sort of like escape with purpose. So trying to go to another place and bring what makes you unique. So your recipes, what you learned in your country, and just bring them somewhere else and create a new environment for yourself, for your family, that can also, be a sort of like a lighthouse for the whole community. I think that was just it was just very, I would say, just intense and complex to hear. That really resonates with me, of course, because me coming from Italy, I also I don't come from any, I would say, very famous backgrounds. I don't come from any family that could at the time even just afford me coming here. So it was really, 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 really tough for me to just come to this country. And so it resonated with me to hear about struggles from other people that similarly wanted to come here and to find their own fortune, their own life. I also do believe that the ideas of um, there's an idea of sort of a destiny in a certain way, so that we're all destined to be somewhere at some point. I remember reading this book about this, and it's really about that. Maybe we are born in a country, we pursue life in a country. Maybe that's where we're not, that's where we don't belong there. We need to go somewhere else to find our own identity. And that was just beautiful. That's what your mom said a few times, and talking about her new life here. And that's also maybe in a certain way influenced you, because when you definitely also had to find your identity in this country, and you were able to just find yourself while also sharing part of your story with now with your customers, now with the people that are interested in your company, because as we said, it all comes from a personal background, but now it's been open to others. There needs to be sort of like you need to be humble, and you also need to be bold and brave to do this, because you need to be able to accept yourself, but also need to be able to share a piece of you with others.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've really captured it so brilliantly, because I will say that for me, and being an immigrant, as a 7-year-old, coming to the United States and then having the transition, but trying to find myself and my identity, or my bicultural, am I Korean, am I American, what am I? And then actually having to go through Italy and Europe and really learn the traditions of those food cultures. And then I thought there was kind of a similarity there to my own kind of growing up in a Korean culture, traditional food. But that's the thing about traditions and food. It really, brings people together. But until I had kind of gone through that journey myself of discovering, Italian, French, all these traditional food cultures myself, and then I really thought that was the direction I was going to do. But then you find deep within yourself who you really are, and then you say, "Oh, this is who I am. This is the common thread." And then, because I never ever thought that I would ever start a business about Korean food, and and in a way, I really had so much respect and pleasure of seeing my mother find her own, voice and her own business. To be a businesswoman, is really not an easy thing, and especially her generation, but even my generation, there's a lot less women that have businesses, than so it's but she really always inspired me, and I thought, well, if there's a way that I can somehow do something with food, and I didn't know what it was, but I knew I didn't want to be a restaurant owner. And then somehow this, the story of the kimchi became the vehicle, and really this thing that became what she started, but much broader, and being able to share with such a broader audience. But I do think that when I look back at sort of the journey, like you said, of, what the determination that you need to want to be here as an immigrant, or to really pick up from your roots and go someplace new, that really that's part of the character that really helps you find your path, and
I
then
do.
hopefully you realize that path was already always within you,
Yeah. I
Yeah.
do think so. I feel like every time I feel like when we're trying to find our purpose in our life, there's always a beginning, a sort of rejection of where we started, because we feel like, oh, I can do something different. I'm not like that.
Yeah.
I can be different. I can do this. I can do that. You were talking about, you also, experimenting with other cuisines, from nationalities, which is what we all want to do. We all at the beginning were like, oh, I'm different. I will be this. I will be this in my life. But in a certain way, what we are, it what makes us unique. And what makes us unique is what will be important for others. If
Yeah.
we don't grab from our own past and our own expertise, then what are we? We're just a waste in a certain way. We're wasting what we learned and what we just experimented in our life.
Yeah. And I do think that it's about like that journey more so than the destination or the end
Yes,
result, because I think so
exactly.
much of it are culturally, and just what social media tells you, it's like
Of
focus
course,
on the end, the end result. And you're like, it's never about the end result. It's
exactly.
that gets you there, kind of like, I think how you really put together in the short film. It was really this long journey of being able to capture the feeling of what it means to be, kind of watching the soup being made, or being part
Yeah,
of what really goes on in the restaurant, or like a living thing. So thank you for capturing such a deeply wonderful moment. Really a personal story for me and my mother as well. So and just like anything and everything, as I was doing it, I was like, "This is so hard. Why am I doing?" It's like,
it was a tough process, because I remember that when we talking about the documentary, I remember when we started out, we're thinking where to start with it. We were
yeah,
saying, okay, so I remember we put some questions together. At the beginning, it just had to be one interview with your mother, basically, and maybe one of the chefs at the restaurant. And
yeah,
we're thinking, okay, so these are the questions. Now, is this correct? Should we ask something else? Are we repeating ourselves? And uh, and as we're doing that, I remember that it was also, oh wait, but we should also have your opinion into this, because you're part of this reality as well. So
yeah.
how do we bring Laura into the Jang Mo Jip picture? And then it became polishing the questions, and then just finding over different elements. So I remember it was complex, but it was very fun.
Yeah, no, and you put in so much, I think, time and effort into it that it really shows. I mean, yeah, that heart and soul that you put into it. Is there, just out of curiosity for you, was there like a feeling that made you kind of connect with your own Italian food culture as you were kind of going through this for you?
I do think so. I think, I mean, in a certain way, the cuisine that your mom pursues, and what I saw growing up, the certain, how can I say, emphasis on the simplicity of things.
Mhm.
Usually our recipes are not the most complex one. They might be complex because, of time needed to make them happen. Definitely, it's not something that can happen in 10 minutes in the morning.
Right.
But there's also a need to make even the most complex things simple, because the food is a food for people. The
Mhm.
food that you have is not intended to be for any mysterious king. It's about to really give it to the community. And I feel like this need for simplicity to, in a certain way, find the just few elements will make the dish work. It's very similar to Italian cuisine and also the Korean cuisine that experimented with your restaurant, because it just finds its root into, as I said, simplicity, into making a food which is just about right for any person. So it will be good for people that work at night, people work in the morning. Some of these soups are meant to maybe, even having some like healing processes,
Yeah.
but they're all meant for all the citizens. So this is not a food that will be rejected, but it's a food that needs to be embraced and that everybody can take.
Yeah. it's I think it's time. It's this kind of slow food that,
Yeah.
it's like there's so much love in it, really.
Yeah, that it's a love culture in a certain way. When we cook these dishes, I remember even in Italy, sometimes some people are still nowadays make with pasta sauce, and they make it overnight, and we need to blend all the ingredients, and everything needs to be fresh, and everything needs to be coming from a specific place. You
Yeah.
can't just pick up whatever you see in the street or you see in the market. There's literally a need to create something which is which in a certain way, which is embodying your vision of what you want to do with food. So your vision needs to be part of what you're cooking. If your vision doesn't matter, what you're cooking also doesn't matter, because it's just cooking to feed somebody, and that loses all the purpose.
Yeah. If there's just one kind of important theme that you'd want the audience to take, what do you think would be the most important one for you?
I think it's about it's the idea that once you find what your journey will be, you need to pursue it without hesitation. I feel like your mother understood that her journey would have been to come here and to make this activity happen and to make it her own, and she embraced it. She decided that was a life purpose, that was a lifestyle, and that would condition her for the years to come and for her life. I feel like once you
Yeah.
see what you have to do, what your life calls you to do, then just take it in full hands and just get the best out of it.
Yeah, I really saw that, like you said, that service aspect, to serve your community,
Yes.
to serve others, really being a powerful one, because that really gives meaning, to just what you're doing is to serve others and to be in community with your fellow humans. And so that is probably the greatest purpose, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, thank you so much. I mean, I feel like we really covered a lot of just deeply meaningful things about this short
We covered
movie.
pretty much everything, yeah. Do you want me to say something about the making process of a documentary? Do you want me to add to that or no?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. That would be great.
Okay. Let me add then this. So, okay, so let me just start on this. So, yeah, so I remember when we were making our documentary, as I mentioned before, we were trying to find the right direction for it. I remember that when we were doing it, we weren't very sure about how big your presence has to be in it. When we decided that he had to be more of a mother and daughter story, and how the story in a certain way influenced different companies and different institutions. And we're making, I remember we were trying to find the right questions to conceive this idea and to communicate it. And we're thinking, oh, this will need to be translated at some point. So we've also brought translator into the conversation, because of the conversation, when I was filming it, I was feeling it. In Italy, we say with the eyes of my heart. I was feeling what was happening, but I couldn't understand really some of the sentences.
I
So
know.
that was maybe the most complex and the biggest challenge we faced while making this.
Yeah.
Um, and definitely was an aspect. I remember when I also was talking to some of the chefs who were talking to me in the kitchen and were making these beautiful sentences, and I was nodding. I was saying, yes, yes, but I had no idea. I was hoping we're going the right direction, and we're like communicating by mimicking, by doing like little gestures to understand each other. Um, and I just think the best thing of this whole process of creating this documentary was also just to find these different cultures coming together, and also in a certain way just seeing how in another level the Korean culture can be translated to modern times, because some of the issues we found was also, oh, this is certain, it comes from like a personal interpretation of the meaning that's part of the Korean culture, but now we want to make it in the English culture. And so we're thinking about how to adapt everything and how in a certain way to translate the different meanings. So I feel like maybe one of the best things about this documentary was also just finding a new language to communicate between your mother's restaurant and the current community that she has. That was, I think, was also a beautiful element we brought up together.
Yeah. No, that was great. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, 'cause I felt bad. I was like, You're not understanding any of it." You had like such a good face about just, being, yeah.
Yeah, it was very entertaining. It was very fun to together. Yeah.
Thank you again, Eduardo. It's such a pleasure speaking with you about the film and our project together. Will forever be such a special piece of just legacy for me and my mom and family, but just the storytelling. I really want to thank you for putting so much heart and effort into it. And it's just something, just a pleasure to speak with you about it again.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to just bring this project together, to bring it to life together. And it was just a unique experience for me, very heartfelt from my own immigrant standpoint. And it was just a beautiful way to bring up, I think, the identity of the restaurant and also of Marvin Love's Kimchi as well.